I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Riley Williams, a 23-year-old female from Pennsylvania who participated in the insurrection and went to trial for her criminal conduct, was convicted in a federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. on Monday of 6 charges related to the insurrection, including 2 felony counts. The felony counts she was convicted of include participating in a civil disorder and impeding officers who tried to clear the Capitol Rotunda. The jury in the trial was hung on 2 other felony counts. One felony count related to aiding and abetting in the theft of Nancy Pelosi's laptop. The defense put on by Riley Williams was that she simply bragged and boasted about it, but she blamed that conduct on other insurrectionists, including the Oath Keepers, and portrayed herself as just a girl who didn't know what she was doing. And the other felony count the jury hung on involved obstruction of Congress for the January 6th proceeding, which would have carried with it a 20-year maximum penalty. And so the Department of Justice will have to decide if they're going to retry those 2 counts, but no worries, because the counts that Riley Williams was convicted of, those 6 charges, carry with them a very stiff prison sentence, and the presiding judge, Judge Amy Berman Jackson, who has a reputation of being no nonsense, especially when it comes to sentencing January 6th insurrectionists, was not having it and immediately remanded Riley Williams into custody immediately. Riley Williams thought that she was going to be walking out of court a free woman after that verdict reached by the jury and wait sentencing. But no, Judge Amy Berman Jackson said, nope, we are putting you in jail immediately. And this is what Amy Berman Jackson said about Riley Williams. Amy Berman Jackson said, quote, "She was profane. She was obnoxious. She was threatening. She organized others to forcibly resist." And Judge Amy Berman Jackson also found and agreed with the Department of Justice that Riley Williams could be a flight risk, and that Riley Williams was culpable and really not remorseful for her conduct in any way. Now, as I mentioned earlier in this video, Riley Williams's lawyer put on a defense that, look, the Oath Keepers were the bad guys. These insurrectionists were these other insurrectionists were the bad guys. Riley Williams didn't even know if she was in the White House or the Capitol building. She didn't know where she was. She just happened to wind up in the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi's office. Now, the jury wasn't buying that with respect to a lot of the counts, and there was lots of witness testimony of Riley Williams and people saying what Riley Williams was talking about with the laptop and, let's go into Nancy Pelosi's office, and statements to those effects. There was also testimony that Riley Williams referred to herself as a groyper, and a groyper apparently are the followers of the right-wing extremist Nick Fuentes, who spreads Nazi propaganda. And Riley Williams' friends testified that as the certification came closer and as the election came and passed, that she noticed Riley Williams sinking deeper into this Nick Fuentes orbit and being increasingly influenced by Nick Fuentes. In fact, it was one of Riley Williams' ex-boyfriends who testified during the trial that Riley Williams had become, quote, obsessed with Fuentes' podcast in the weeks leading up to the January 6th insurrection. Also, individuals who testified included Jamie Fleet, who was and is a top aide to Nancy Pelosi. And the Pelosi aides who testified at trial talked about the fear that they experienced as these insurrectionists, including Riley Williams, broke into Nancy Pelosi's office. And the aides were very close by at an adjacent office, and they were hiding, not sure if the insurrectionists were going to find them and kill them. Now, I want to talk about Amy Berman Jackson, because federal judge Amy Berman Jackson has been handing out the toughest of sentences, or among the toughest of sentences, of federal judges in Washington, D.C., who have presided over these criminal cases involving these insurrectionists. I guess one thing to point out, too, about Riley Williams' case, it was actually the first case to go to trial yet that involved a female as the criminal defendant. All the other ones have included plea agreements, but this was the first one to actually go to a federal trial. And Riley Williams' lawyer really leaned into this, and in fact, during the trial, even referred to Riley Williams as a girl who didn't know what she was doing, and referred to, her attire as, supposedly to be demonstrative of that she really had no ill intent. And they really pointed to the Oath Keepers and the other insurrectionists as the bad actors. That was their defense. And look, the jury convicted on 6 charges, 2 felonies, but they still hung on these other 2 felonies. So what do I think is going to happen with respect to those other 2 felonies? I think the Department of Justice is likely going to retry the case as it relates just to those 2 felonies, because there was testimony that Riley Williams was bragging and boasting about stealing Nancy Pelosi's laptop. And the defense that Riley Williams made to the jury was that she would just brag and boast about these things, but she didn't actually really do that. And when she realized that there was serious legal trouble that she was going to be on, she stopped telling that story to people, which Riley Williams' lawyer said was a lie. Now, back to Amy Berman Jackson, who's been handing out these really significant sentences. And in the sentencing that she's been doing, she's been using very strong language to condemn MAGA extremists, the insurrectionists. And so let me just read for you in prior sentencing some of the statements that Amy Berman Jackson made. So about mid-October, during a sentencing of an insurrectionist by the name of Cleveland Grover of Georgia, this is what Amy Berman Jackson said during the sentencing. She said, quote, "The heated and inflammatory rhetoric that brought the defendant to this district has not subsided. The lie that the election was stolen and illegitimate is still being perpetrated. Indeed, it is being amplified, not only on social media, but on mainstream news outlets. And worse, it has become heresy for a member of the former president's party to say otherwise." She went on to say, "It needs to be crystal clear that it is not patriotism. It is not standing up for America, and it is not justified to descend on the nation's capital at the direction of a disappointed candidate and threaten members of the other party." And that's what she said before handing down the sentence to Cleveland Grover in mid-October. You may also recall the news alert that I did regarding the sentencing of a particularly violent insurrectionist who goes by the name of Albuquerque Head. He's from Tennessee, Al Head. He was the one who dragged Officer Fanone to the mob, who then brutally beat and assaulted Officer Fanone. And Al Head was sentenced by Amy Berman Jackson to, I think it was 7 years and 6 months in prison. And let me read for you just some of the words that Judge Amy Berman Jackson said in the sentencing here. She talked about how Mr. Head was trying to break the officer's hold on the door with more heaving from behind. She went on to say that regarding Officer Fanon, he was your prey. He was your trophy, and you exposed him to the crowd. She went on to say that you have no respect for the courts or police, so don't even try to make those arguments here. And then she went on to say, you're not standing here today because you came to D.C. for the rally or supported the former president or followed his calls to walk up the street and continue the protest at the Capitol. You're not locked up for politics. You're sentenced today for engaging in violence in that day. Mr. Head did not simply get caught up in something. Then she talked about how Officer Fanone was protecting Mr. Head, your government, our government, the peaceful transition of power after an election. He was protecting America. Then she went on to say, we can't blame it on you just being brainwashed about the election. People need to understand that they can't do this or anything like this again. They can't try to force their will on the American people once the American people have spoken at the ballot box. She continued to say there are still people disseminating the lie that the election was stolen, still to this day. So I think we can expect when it comes to Riley Williams' sentencing that she is also going to be in for a rude awakening and a serious prison sentence. The Department of Justice now has to decide if they are going to retry those 2 felony counts that I talked about that the jury hung on, aiding and abetting the theft of Nancy Pelosi's laptop and obstructing the official proceedings on January 6th. But they did get convictions on those 2 other felony counts, which are serious felonies and will carry serious prison sentence, and 4 other charges. And again, Riley Williams thought she was just going to walk out of court and go right out and celebrate the day. But nope, Amy Berman Jackson said, you're a flight risk. You're going to jail right now. And she will be locked up in jail for, at least in my view, probably a few years once sentencing takes place. And she'll remain in custody while the sentencing process will play out. Sentencing will be set in a few months, and we will keep you posted here on what the result of the sentencing is. But Riley Williams, 23 years old of Pennsylvania, has been convicted by a jury on 6 counts. She was convicted in Washington, D.C., remanded into custody immediately. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Hit the subscribe button right now. We're on our way to 1 million subscribers thanks to your support. And in addition to hitting the subscribe, hit subscribe. In addition, consider becoming a patron of the MeidasTouch podcast by going to, in the MeidasTouch Network, by going to patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. There's lots of great exclusive content there, but most importantly, you can help grow this independent media platform. We're not funded by any outside investors at all, so we purely rely on your generosity. No worries if you can't, but if you can, check it out. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch podcast. Until next time.
MeidasTouch is unapologetically pro-democracy. And look, we know you are too. So please make sure you check out our best-selling shirt and our best-selling gear, the unapologetically pro-democracy gear. And hey, while you're at it, make sure you check out my favorite shirt and one of our most famous designs, It Wasn't Rigged, You're Just a Loser, at store.meidastouch.com. That's store.meidastouch.com.